Welcome back. I'm Dr. Cheek and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. And today, in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the concept of self-hate. And there's a lot of reasons that this has been coming to my mind lately, mainly because I've had a lot of clients that have been talking about self-hate and self-worth, and I think it's a valuable conversation to have. And when I think about self-hate, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the old Malcolm X speech entitled, "Who Taught You to Hate Yourself?" And if you've never seen it, if you've never heard it, if you've never read it, I highly recommend. 10 out of 10 recommend. Now, Malcolm X originally wrote this piece and this speech directed towards the Black community and focusing on the internalized racism that the Black community and that we tend to have towards ourselves because of things that we've been taught, environments that we persisted in that have taught us not to love who we are as individuals and to hate aspects of ourselves. But today I'm going to be talking about it in terms of a universal concept. And self-hate is a universal concept that all types of individuals deal with. And now first, let's define what is self-hate. Now, self-hate can be simply defined as hatreds turned inwards towards yourself instead of towards others. It also can be defined as a negative self-view that makes you believe that you are not good enough. And self-hate is commonly associated with a lot of mental health concerns, such as anxiety, depression, eating disorders. These are just to name a few of some of the mental health concerns that you will find like a commonality with individuals tending to feel some level of self-hate. And also, self-hate, there are some studies out there, not enough to actually account for the prevalence that it's showing in today's society, because self-hate, it's a topic of conversation that comes up a lot in therapy sessions. And I think it's becoming increasingly more common and more evident in today's world that this is something that needs to be talked about and is valuable to understand the psychology behind self-hate. And the first thing I want to focus on is ways that self-hate may show up in your everyday life that you're not even aware of. Now, one way that it may show up is when you allow yourself to stay in relationships. Now, that could be family relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, any type of interpersonal relationship. When you allow yourself to stay in those relationships, when those relationships have proven to be toxic, harmful, unhealthy, dangerous, or damaging in any way, but you allow yourself to maintain those relationships even though they hurt you in some way, whether it's mentally, physically, or emotionally. Another way that it may show up is staying in places or environments where it is clear that you are unwanted, when you are devalued, where you are treated with disrespect, where you are underappreciated, where you are taken for granted. So maintaining or staying in those environments where that type of behavior persists towards you. Another way is when we engage in behaviors that show a level of disrespect or disregard to ourselves. And sometimes we engage in those disrespectful or denigrating behaviors towards ourselves as a way of devaluing ourselves to make someone else feel more important or have greater value in our lives or in their own lives. Sometimes it also can look like us making ourselves small so someone else can feel like they have greater worth or feel like they're larger in the present circumstances in your life, in their life, in whatever environment that you're existing in. And lastly is that we align ourselves with a person or people who have shown hostility, disdain, or actual hate towards ourselves or individuals who look similar to us. So those individuals in our community that share some same identity dimensions that we share, or even those intersectional identity dimensions that we share, and they are not hiding how they truly feel, the hostility, the hate, or the disdain that they have for that community, and you align yourself with them. All of those are ways that self-hate may show up in our everyday lives. Now, most studies show that self-hate can be attributed to growing up in an environment where your parents, your caregivers, those who were responsible for taking care of you or protecting you, they never made you feel valued. They would commonly devalue you as a child. They never made you feel like anything you did was good enough. If you ever did anything at your absolute best, they would critique it in a way that made you feel like even your best effort wasn't enough. You may have dealt with abuse in childhood, whether that's emotional, psychological, or sexual or physical abuse in childhood. It may look like having adult relationships where that exists, where you are degraded, where you are devalued, where someone is constantly negatively critiquing you in a way that's not trying to build you to do better, but they are being very harmful to you, but because they are being very critical and hurtful in their criticisms of you. It's an environment where you're constantly told that you are no good, that you do not bring any value, that you are not an asset. Is being in those environments where that type of negativity is directed towards you. You can start to internalize that messaging as your own feelings towards yourself and start to hate yourself and align with the individuals that are making you feel that way, and not acknowledge that it's the environment that you're in that's causing these negative feelings that you have towards yourself, as opposed to maybe what you truly feel about yourself. So also, it may be related to experiencing past trauma, whether that's childhood trauma or trauma that is experienced in adulthood, whether it's multiple life traumas or one major trauma. It can change how we see ourselves, and it can start to turn into self-hate because of that traumatic experience. Now, what are some questions that you can ask to help you understand if you are practicing in some level of self-hate? Some questions you may want to ask: do I like myself? Do I love myself? What is it about me as an individual that I like, that I appreciate, that I am grateful for having as a part of who I am? If you take an opportunity to look in the mirror and ask yourself, how do I truly feel about this person who's looking back at me? Do I care for that person? Am I willing to protect that person? Do I see them the same way that someone else who has a negative critique of me see me? And if it's rarely anything positive, if it's all like coming from a negative space of, I don't really like me, I don't really love me, I'm not really concerned about my safety, if something happens, it happens, then you may be operating from a space of self-hate or lower self-worth. And I want to be clear. We all experience some level of self-hate. Self-hate in the aspect of not feeling adequate in certain areas and feeling unworthy in certain areas. Like we may feel like we are not doing as well as we would want to do at work or at school, or as being a parent, or as being a spouse, or some aspect of your life where you feel inadequate and you feel some sense of guilt because of that inadequacy. And you may engage in some level of self-hate towards your role or your experience or your performance in that specific area. The difference between someone who is operating from some level of individual self-hate in a specific aspect and someone who internalized that self-hate as an aspect of who they are is that the person who internalized that self-hate as an aspect of who they are, every aspect of their lives, they feel some level of inadequacy or guilt, whether that's factual or not, as opposed to most of us having some level of self-hate in certain aspects of life because we feel some level of inadequacy in that aspect of life. And are there things that we can do to help? Yes. And the greatest way sometimes to combat that self-hate is starting to learn ways to build self-confidence, to maybe get out of those toxic environments, or acknowledge if you're in a toxic environment and start to maybe set some boundaries and learning how to operate in a space where you learn to protect yourself, see your worth, build that internalized self-worth and self-confidence so that you can not look towards external validation, but you can pull from that internal validation. And I'm saying this, and I want you to be really clear. It may be helpful in this aspect to seek help to do this work. Because when you're already operating from a space of self-hate, the ability to step back from that and start to see yourself in a positive light is less likely. And what may happen in that moment is you may try to do this work on your own. And when you find that you are not making the progress that you feel like you should be making, because sometimes when we're practicing from a space of self-hate, we set unrealistic goals for ourselves that perpetuate this feeling of inadequacy that we already feel. So if you're trying to do this on your own without some level of help, professional help, then you may start to feel worse about yourself, and that self-hate may grow in intensity because you are still operating from a space where you are setting goals for yourself that are unrealistically high, and when you're not able to meet those, it only makes you feel a lot worse about yourself internally, and that self-hate starts to intensify. This is why I say seek help, because you can start to learn how to recognize the progress, even though you may not have achieved the long-term goal. You start to highlight those areas of progress that you are making, and you start to see where you can continue to improve. And there is someone else helping you to see what you've been unable to see at this point, maybe because you've learned that you should hate yourself, that you shouldn't love yourself. You learned that you aren't worthy. You've learned this for so long that you aren't able to see the smaller progress that you've made, the steps that you are making as steps to those major goals. Sometimes we go into this and expecting that I go from self-hating myself one day to loving everything about me in the next day. And that's not realistic. And that's not how this works when we're dealing with internalized, learned understanding of who we are. So when we've gotten to that place where we've learned that self-hate is core to who we are, learning how to change that is going to take some work, and it's probably going to be slower progress. And you might see slower changes in your life than you would want if you're trying to do this on your own. But when you're doing it with a professional, you can start to highlight, and they can start to highlight for you that you are making those steps. You are making those changes, so you don't get into that cycle of, I'm doing the work, I don't feel any differently because I was expecting to feel 100% better. I feel that 5%, but that 5% is not that 100%. So because I'm not getting to that 100% that I was expecting, then yep, I'm not worthy. So this is a cycle that we want to break in mental health. This is why I say seek help. Now, what I hope you take from this video is this. Self-hate is something that is becoming more and more prevalent in the world, in the community, in therapy sessions that we are having to discuss. There could be multiple things that attribute to that self-hate, whether it's experiences that we've had throughout childhood and adulthood that has taught us to see ourselves in this way, whether it's experiencing major traumas or multiple complex traumas over a lifetime, whether it's being in environments that teach us that this is how we should see ourselves, whether it's internalized aspects that we haven't unlearned. Those are things that sometimes contributes to us feeling some level of self-hate, and ways that it shows up is by maintaining unhealthy or damaging relationships, staying in places where you're unwanted, underappreciated, and taken for granted, being with individuals that want to devalue you in order for them to increase their own value, or aligning with individuals that it's clear in any other circumstance, they would hate you as well because they have a level of hate for individuals that share your same characteristics. Those are ways that it shows up. There are ways that you can help with this self-hate. There are things that you can do to build up your internalized confidence and validation so you can start to eliminate some of that and that self-hate or the intensity of the self-hate, or start to notice where you truly feel inadequate and make the adjustments in those areas. But that requires that you seek professional help. It's something that I want to express that may be hard to do on your own because of how you tend to feel about yourself or how you're tending to feel about yourself at this moment. As always, I hope you take something from this video today that has been helpful, that has been informative, that gives you some additional information that you may not have already known, or that you do know, but it expands on what you already know. Please feel free to jot down any thoughts, questions, or comments you have below. I thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll be seeing you again very soon. Thank you.